The soft glow of candlelight flickered against the walls of our elegantly decorated dining room, casting playful shadows that danced in rhythm with the ambient music that filled the air. I stood at the table, adjusting the placement of the finely crafted silverware, my heart pounding with excitement. It was our anniversary, and I had planned this night down to the smallest detail, wanting to celebrate my love for Caitlyn in a way that would make this milestone unforgettable. James, are you sure about all this? Caitlyn's voice broke through my thoughts as she entered the room, her eyes widening at the sight of the extravagant setup. She wore a stunning red dress that hugged her figure perfectly, accentuating her grace and beauty. Her hair cascaded in soft waves around her shoulders, and a hint of perfume lingered in the air as she approached. "Of course I am. Happy anniversary, my love," I exclaimed, embracing her tightly. The warmth of her body against mine felt like home, and I couldn't help but smile as I pulled back to look into her sparkling green eyes. I wanted this night to be special. "It really is beautiful, James," she replied, her lips curling into a slight smile, though I noticed a fleeting look of distraction cross her face. I shrugged it off, chalking it up to the lingering stress of her work. Caitlyn had always been the epitome of grace, but lately I sensed that something was weighing on her. As we sat down for dinner, I poured us both glasses of fine red wine, the rich aroma swirling around us like the promises we had made to each other years ago. We shared stories and laughter, reminiscing about our early days together. I watched Caitlyn as she spoke, her laughter like music to my ears, but the nagging feeling in the back of my mind wouldn't let me fully enjoy the moment. "James, remember that time we went to Paris?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with nostalgia. "Of course, how could I forget? You insisted on trying escargot." I chuckled, recalling the grimace on her face after she took the first bite. "You were so brave. Brave or foolish?" She laughed, her voice lightening the tension that seemed to hang in the air. But even as she laughed, I noticed her gaze drift toward her phone, resting face down on the table. It was odd. Caitlyn was usually attentive during our dinners, but tonight her focus seemed fractured. "Everything okay?" I ventured, trying to keep my tone casual. "Yeah, just a message from work," she said, but I could hear a slight tremor in her voice. The way she avoided my eyes felt like a warning sign, a crack in the facade of our perfect evening. "Work this late on our anniversary?" I asked, trying to inject some lightness into the conversation. "They should know better than to bother you tonight." The minutes felt like hours as I waited for her to return. I could hear the soft murmur of her voice from the other room, but it was muffled, making it impossible for me to discern what she was saying. The laughter we had shared moments ago felt like a distant memory, replaced by a gnawing sense of dread. When Caitlyn finally returned, her demeanor had shifted. She sat down, a strained smile plastered on her face, but her eyes betrayed her. They were distant, as if she was somewhere far away, lost in thoughts that didn't involve me. "Everything all right?" I asked, my voice laced with concern. "Yeah, just a minor emergency at work," she said dismissively, but I could tell it was more than that. I wanted to press further, to dig deeper, but something held me back. Perhaps it was the trust I had in her, the years of love that had built a solid foundation between us. "Let's not talk about work tonight," I said, lifting my glass. "To us." "To us," she echoed, clinking her glass against mine, though her gaze was unfocused, staring past me rather than into my eyes. We resumed our dinner, but the atmosphere felt heavy, like a storm brewing just out of sight. I tried to lighten the mood, sharing silly anecdotes and jokes. But Caitlyn's laughter felt forced. The sparkle in her eyes had dimmed, and with every passing moment the weight on my chest grew heavier. After dinner I excused myself to the kitchen to fetch dessert, hoping that a sweet treat would brighten the mood. As I rummaged through the fridge, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over the evening. I couldn't recall the last time Caitlyn had been so distracted. My mind raced with possibilities, each one darker than the last. When I returned to the dining room, I found Caitlyn's phone sitting unattended on the table. It stared at me, a small glowing rectangle that felt like a Pandora's box. I hesitated, a wave of temptation washing over me. I had always prided myself on trust, believing that love meant giving each other space and privacy. But what if that trust was misplaced? I shook my head, trying to clear my thoughts. No, I couldn't invade her privacy like that. I had to believe in her, in us. But the gnawing suspicion lingered, twisting my stomach into knots. Just as I was about to put the dessert down, my phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me from my thoughts. It was a message from Mark, my best friend and confidant. "Hey man, everything good?" I couldn't help but chuckle bitterly. "Yeah, just dinner with Caitlyn. You?" "Hope you're having a great time. Let's catch up soon," he replied. The casual nature of his words felt like a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing inside me. "Thanks. Yeah, I will," I replied, stuffing my phone back into my pocket. When I turned back to the table, I caught Caitlyn staring at her phone again, her brow furrowed in concentration. I felt a rush of frustration. Why was she so engrossed in it? "Caitlyn, are you okay?" asked, my voice slightly sharper than I intended. She looked up, surprised. "What? Yes, I'm fine. Are you sure? You seem distracted." "I'm just tired, James. It's been a long week." "Okay, if you say so," I replied. But doubt crept in again. I wanted to reach out, to pull her closer, but the distance between us felt insurmountable. As we finished dinner, I tried to shake the nagging feeling, but it clung to me like a shadow. After clearing the table, Caitlyn excused herself to freshen up, and as she walked away, I glanced at her phone once more. It was still there, waiting for me, a silent challenge. I took a deep breath, my fingers hovering over the device, considering my next move. I could check it, see what secrets it held, but the thought of violating her trust made me hesitate. Instead, I decided to respect her privacy, reminding myself that love was built on trust, not suspicion. I walked away from the phone, the decision weighing heavily on my conscience. Caitlyn returned shortly, and I forced a smile, pushing my doubts aside. "Ready for dessert?" I asked, trying to inject a light note into the evening. "Absolutely," she replied, her smile genuine this time. But as we settled into the living room with a slice of cake, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As I watched her, the weight of the evening pressed down on me. I wanted to believe in the love we had built, but the cracks were beginning to show, and I couldn't help but wonder what lay beneath the surface. The night felt like a fragile facade, and I was left with the unsettling feeling that the truth was lurking just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. As the days passed after the anniversary dinner, an unsettling feeling settled into the pit of my stomach, and I found myself hyper aware of Caitlyn's every move. It was as if I had donned a pair of glasses that magnified her every action, revealing something I hadn't noticed before. I had always been proud of our life together. Caitlyn was the embodiment of grace and charm, a perfect partner for someone like me. Yet, with each passing day, I felt the distance between us grow, an invisible thread stretching thin, threatening to snap. One evening, as I sat in my office surrounded by the warm glow of the desk lamp, I heard the front door close softly. I glanced at the clock on the wall. It was well past midnight. My heart raced as I stood up, walking toward the living room to greet her. "Caitlyn," I called out, trying to mask the tremor in my voice. "Hey, James, I'm back," she replied, her voice bright but tinged with an urgency that set off alarm bells in my mind. I stepped into the living room, my eyes scanning her face for signs of fatigue or guilt, but all I found was a practiced smile. "You were at work late again?" "Oh, you know how it is," she said, shrugging off my question as she slipped off her shoes and padded toward the kitchen. "The art class has really taken off, and the gallery is asking for more pieces. Just trying to keep up." That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the shadows dancing above me like the chaotic thoughts in my mind. Caitlyn's insistence on her new hobby felt like a veil, something that was meant to distract me from whatever was truly happening. I tossed and turned, the sheets twisting around me, feeling the weight of my own unease. The next week, I found myself in the office of my best friend, Mark. He was sprawled across his desk, looking over some papers for a client, but his smile faded as I entered. "Hey, James, what's up?" I took a seat, running my hands through my hair. "I need to talk to you about Caitlyn." His expression shifted to one of concern. "What's going on? You look worried." I've noticed she's been working late a lot lately. And this art class? It feels like she's hiding something from me." Mark leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "You're probably overthinking it, man. People get busy, especially with new projects. It doesn't mean she's hiding something." I shook my head, frustration bubbling within me. "You don't understand. It's not just busy. It feels like she's pulling away. And those texts I saw her get during our anniversary dinner, they were from someone else, Mark. Come on, James, you're jumping to conclusions. Maybe it's just a colleague or a friend. You can't start accusing her without any proof." "But what if—" I paused, struggling to find the words. "What if she is seeing someone else?" Mark sighed, running a hand over his face. "Look, you know I care about you, but you have to trust Caitlyn. If you start doubting her without evidence, you're going to ruin what you have." I nodded, but deep down the seed of doubt had already been planted. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. As the week wore on, I became increasingly restless, consumed by thoughts of Caitlyn and her whereabouts. One evening, I decided I needed to put my suspicions to rest. I would surprise Caitlyn at her art class. Surely seeing her in her element would calm my nerves. I donned a casual outfit and left the house, my heart pounding with anticipation and anxiety. As I drove towards the studio, the setting sun cast an orange hue over the city, and I found myself lost in thought. I parked outside the studio, a quaint building nestled between two lodge structures, and stepped out of the car. A sense of excitement bubbled within me, mingling with the lingering tension. I pushed the door open, but the studio was dark and empty. My heart sank as I scanned the room, the silence echoing my unease. I approached the front desk, hoping someone might be there to explain the odd absence. "Hello?" I called out, my voice feeling small in the vast emptiness. No response. I checked my watch. Caitlyn should have still been there. Confusion replaced my initial excitement. I turned on my heel and walked back outside, glancing around the street for any sign of her. Maybe she had gone for a quick coffee run. The thought offered a flicker of hope, but it didn't last long. I pulled out my phone and dialed her number, but it went straight to voicemail. "Caitlyn, where are you?" I muttered to myself, frustration bubbling to the surface. I forced a smile, trying to mask the whirlwind of emotions. "I went by the studio to surprise you, but it was closed. I was just wondering where you were." "Oh," she exclaimed, her eyes widening. "I must have left early to grab some supplies. I didn't think you'd come by." I stared at her, searching for any hint of deceit. "You didn't think to tell me?" "I'm sorry, I just got caught up in what I was doing," she said, her voice rising slightly in pitch. "I thought I'd make it back in time." "Right?" I replied, my tone flat. "It just feels like you've been distant lately, Caitlyn." "Distant?" she repeated, her brows knitting together. "That's not fair, James. I'm working hard for us." "I know, but I can't help but feel like there's something more going on. You're always busy, always working late. It's starting to feel like you're hiding something from me." "I just want to understand," I shot back, my voice rising in frustration. "I am trying to be supportive, but you're giving me nothing to work with. You can't expect me to just sit here and pretend everything is fine." She crossed her arms, her jaw clenched. "You're acting like, I owe you an explanation for every minute of my life. Maybe you should trust me instead of jumping to conclusions." As the tension in the room escalated, I felt the familiar sting of helpless. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting hues of orange and pink across the sky, I found myself sitting alone in my study, staring at my laptop screen. It was a strange juxtaposition. The beauty of the evening outside contrasted sharply with the turmoil swirling inside me. I had tried to dismiss my growing suspicions about Caitlyn, but they gnawed at me like a persistent itch I couldn't scratch. Her behavior had become so erratic, so inexplicable, that I felt compelled to take matters into my own hands. I opened her social media account, my heart pounding as I navigated through her posts. There was a time when I took comfort in her online presence, relishing the snapshots of our life together. Vacations in tropical paradises, dinner parties with friends, and quiet moments at home. Now, However, each photo felt like a potential lie. I scrolled past images of her smiling with friends, her face radiant and carefree, but something about her recent posts felt off. The captions seemed vague. T. I... Then I stumbled upon a series of photos that sent a chill down my spine. Caitlyn stood in front of a large canvas, paintbrush in hand. But it wasn't the art that caught my attention. It was the man beside her, an arm draped casually over her shoulder, a smirk on his face that made my stomach churn. I leaned closer to the screen, squinting at the unfamiliar face. Who was he? Why had I never seen him before? The more I looked, the more questions I had. James? Caitlyn's voice broke through my thoughts, and I quickly shut my laptop, my heart racing. I turned to see her standing in the doorway, her hair cascading over her shoulders, a look of concern etched on her face. Are you okay? You seem tense. Yeah, just working on some things, I replied, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. How was your day? Right, later. The word lingered in the air between us, heavy with unspoken tension. She seemed so eager to brush off my concerns, but my instincts screamed otherwise. As Caitlyn turned to leave, I felt a surge of anger mixed with desperation. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. Caitlyn, I called out, my voice firm yet trembling. Can we talk about your absences? She turned back to face me, her expression shifting to one of defensiveness. What do you mean? I mean, you've been gone a lot, and you seem different lately. I just want to understand what's going on. My heart raced as I braced myself for her response. James, you're being controlling, she snapped, crossing her arms over her chest. I'm an adult. I don't have to account for every minute of my life to you. Controlling? I'm just concerned. I shot back, frustration boiling to the surface. You used to tell me everything, Caitlyn. Now, I feel like I don't know you at all. Maybe the problem is with you, James, she retorted, her voice rising. Maybe you need to trust me instead of snooping around and coming up with these ridiculous conclusions. You think I'm snooping? I'm just trying to be a good husband, I shouted, feeling the weight of our crumbling relationship pressing down on me. It's not like you're making it easy for me. You're acting like a stranger. The air crackled with tension, and for a moment we both stood there, breathing heavily. Silence stretching uncomfortably between us. I could see the hurt in her eyes, but it was overshadowed by something else. Anger, perhaps, or guilt. I can't keep doing this, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. I need space, James. I thought you would understand. Space? I repeated incredulously. Is that what you call it? Because it feels more like you're pushing me away. Maybe I am, she snapped back, before storming out of the room, leaving me alone with my racing heart and a sinking feeling in my gut. I fell back against my desk, running a hand through my hair in frustration. What the hell was happening to us? Just as I was about to lose myself in a spiral of doubt, my phone buzzed on the table. It was Mark, my best friend. I picked it up, hoping for a distraction from my spiraling thoughts. "Hey, man," Mark said, his voice sounding slightly strained. "How's it going?" "Not great," I admitted, leaning back in my chair. "Caitlyn and I just had a huge fight. I don't know what to do anymore." "Dude, I'm sorry to hear that," he replied sympathetically. "But you know how it is. Marriages go through rough patches. You just need to give it time." "Time?" I scoffed. "It feels like she's hiding something from me, Mark. I can't shake the feeling that there's something going on." The weight of my suspicions felt heavier than the finest silk suit I wore as I sat at my desk the next morning, staring blankly at the stack of paperwork that demanded my attention. My mind kept drifting back to Caitlyn, her distracted demeanor at our anniversary dinner, mysterious text that had pulled her away. I had tried to brush it all aside to convince myself that she was simply busy with her new art class, but the gnawing feeling in my gut told me otherwise. I couldn't shake the sense of urgency that had begun to consume me. I had to know the truth, and I realized that I had reached a point of desperation. After a restless night filled with tossing and turning, I made a decision that felt both empowering and utterly terrifying. I would hire a private investigator. As I dialed the number of a local agency, my heart raced. The investigator, a grizzled man named Frank with a gravelly voice, seemed to sense my apprehension. "You're looking for answers, huh?" he said, a hint of understanding in his tone. "It's not easy, but I can help you. Just tell me what you want." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my words. I need to know where my wife goes when she says she's at work or in class. I need to know who she's with. "Consider it done," he replied, and for the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. If I could uncover the truth, perhaps I could confront Caitlyn and bring an end to this uncertainty. Days passed, and I went about my routine, but with every tick of the clock, my anxiety grew. I kept my phone close, waiting for an update. Each time it buzzed, my heart would leap, only to sink again when it was just a work email or a news alert. Then, finally, the call came. I was in a meeting when my phone vibrated insistently in my pocket. I excused myself and stepped into the hallway, my pulse racing as I answered. "Frank? Yeah, it's me," he said, his voice low. "I've got some information for you." "You need to sit down." I leaned against the wall, my heart pounding. "Just tell me." "I've been following Caitlyn for the past few days. She's been meeting a man named David," he said, pausing for a moment as if gauging my reaction. "They've been meeting at a hotel downtown." The world around me blurred. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. "A hotel? How long has this been going on?" "From what I can gather, it's been a few months. She's been pretty careful, but I've got photos and time stamps if you want proof." My throat felt dry, and I struggled to find my voice. "No, I don't need to see the photos. I believe you. I can't believe this is happening. I know it's hard, James, but you have to decide what you want to do next. You can confront her, or you can gather more evidence. It's your call. I hung up and leaned heavily against the wall, my mind racing. Confronting Caitlyn felt like a loaded gun, one that could either explode in my face or bring about the truth I so desperately sought. But I knew I couldn't just sit back and let this continue. I had to confront her. As I drove home that evening, my mind was a whirlpool of emotions: anger, betrayal, confusion. The streets blurred past me, each red light a reminder of the turmoil brewing within. I parked my car, took a deep breath, and stepped into our home. The place that had once felt like a sanctuary, now feeling like a prison. The silence that hung between us felt suffocating. I watched as her face paled, and a mix of emotions played across her features. "James, I can explain." "Explain what?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "What can you possibly say that would make this okay? That you've been lying to me, sneaking around behind my back? Please, just let me talk," she pleaded, her hands trembling slightly. "It was a mistake, a moment of weakness." "A moment of weakness?" I echoed incredulously. "You've been seeing him for months. How is that just a mistake?" "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said, her voice breaking. I felt so alone. "And you've been so busy with work. I just..." "Alone?" I scoffed, feeling the anger boil over. "I've given you everything. A beautiful home, a comfortable life. What more could you possibly want?" Caitlyn looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wanted your attention. I wanted you to notice me again." "What you wanted was to betray me," I shouted, my heart racing. "You didn't just want attention, you wanted someone else, and now you've ruined everything." Tears filled her eyes, and I felt a pang of guilt at the sight of her distress. But the betrayal was too fresh, too raw to ignore. "I never wanted to hurt you, James. It just happened." David made me feel alive again. "Alive?" I repeated, my voice laced with disbelief. "You think cheating on your husband makes you feel alive?" "It was never about you. It was about me," she cried, frustration and despair mingling in her tone. "I lost myself somewhere along the way, and I didn't know how to find my way back." "By sleeping with another man?" I asked, my voice cracking with pain. "Do you even understand how deeply you've hurt me?" Caitlyn took a step toward me, her eyes pleading. "James, please, let's talk about this. I love you. I made a terrible mistake, but it doesn't mean I don't love you." "Love?" I laughed bitterly, the sound echoing in the kitchen. "How can you say that when you've betrayed me? Love doesn't do this." "Then what do we do now?" she asked, desperation creeping into her voice. "Do we just throw everything away?" I shook my head, feeling the tears welling in my eyes. "I don't know what to do. I trusted you, Caitlyn. This isn't something I can just overlook. You've shattered my trust." As I turned away, the weight of my emotions threatened to topple me. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down into an abyss of uncertainty. I couldn't bear to look at her anymore, to see the face of the woman I had loved so deeply, now marred by betrayal. Before I could leave the room, the doorbell rang. I glanced at Caitlyn, who looked as shocked as I felt. "Who could that be?" she whispered. "I don't know," I replied, my heart racing. "Stay here. I'll check." I walked to the door, my mind swirling with the aftermath of our confrontation. hesitation. Who could possibly be visiting at this hour? As I opened the door, I was greeted by Mark, my best friend. His face was pale and he looked anxious, almost as if he had just run a marathon. "Hey, James, can I come in?" he asked, his voice tense. Yeah, sure," I said, stepping aside. "What's going on?" Mark stepped inside, glancing around as if he were searching for something. "I need to talk to you about Caitlyn." Panic surged through me, but I held it back. "What about her?" He hesitated, his gaze flickering to the kitchen where Caitlyn still stood, the remnants of our argument hanging in the air like a dense fog. I don't know how to say this, but I've been trying to protect you." "Protect me?" I echoed, feeling a knot form in my stomach. "From what?" "How long have you known?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I could see the guilt etched across Mark's face, the way his eyes flickered nervously, avoiding mine as if he was afraid of what he might see there. "James, he began, but I cut him off, the anger bubbling to the surface. "No! You don't get to explain this away. You've been watching me suffer and you didn't say a word? How could you do this to me?" My voice rose, the betrayal cutting deeper than any knife could. I felt a rush of heat to my cheeks, a mix of fury and heartbreak. "I was trying to protect you," Mark said, his tone pleading. I thought, maybe if you didn't know, it would all just blow over. You'd be happier not knowing. Happier? How could I ever be happy again knowing my wife is cheating on me? "You think this is protecting me? This is betrayal, Mark." I took a step back, needing space, needing to breathe, but the air felt too thick to inhale. Mark ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I had seen many times before when he was stressed. "I didn't want to see you get hurt. I thought Caitlyn loved you. I thought it was just a phase." "A phase?" I laughed bitterly, the sound echoing off the walls like a ghost. "You think being unfaithful is a phase? How can you stand there and minimize this? This is my life, my marriage, and you sat back and let it happen." I didn't know what to do. I thought if I could just keep you distracted, keep you from asking too many questions. But I did ask questions, Mark. I knew something was off, but you just brushed it aside like it was nothing. The betrayal cut deeper with every word, and I could feel the tears threatening to spill over. I hadn't cried since the night I found out about Caitlyn's affair. But now, every emotion I had bottled up surged forth like a tidal wave. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking slightly. I thought I was doing the right thing. I took a deep breath, trying to regain my composure. I needed to confront Caitlyn, needed to hear her admit it, to see if there was any remorse in her eyes. "I need to talk to her," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Now." Mark nodded, concern etched across his features. "James, are you sure you want to do this now? You're hurt, and I need to hear it from her. I need her to tell me the truth." I turned on my heel, heading for the door, and Mark followed closely behind me, his footsteps echoing in the silence of the hallway. As we reached the car, I felt a mix of dread and determination. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking as I tried to unlock the door. Mark placed a hand on my shoulder, a gesture of comfort, but I shrugged it off. I didn't want comfort. I wanted answers. The drive home felt agonizingly slow. Every red light felt like an eternity. Every passing car a reminder of the life I had thought was perfect. I glanced at Mark, who sat beside me, his expression grave. "You should consider what you're going to say to her," he finally suggested. "I don't need a script, Mark. I just need her to be honest with me. Is that too much to ask?" The bitterness in my tone surprised even me, but I didn't care. I felt raw, exposed, and angry, a cocktail of emotions that threatened to spill over. When we finally pulled into the driveway, my heart raced as I spotted Caitlyn's car parked in the garage. The familiar sight should have brought comfort, but instead, it filled me with dread. Mark looked at me, searching for reassurance, but I could offer none. I stepped out of the car, my legs feeling heavy as I walked toward the front door. "Mark told me," I said, glancing at my friend who stood awkwardly by the door. "You've been lying to me, and I want the truth." Caitlyn's eyes filled with confusion, then desperation. "James, please, let's not do this here. Can we talk about it later?" "No," I said, shaking my head. "We're talking about it now. I deserve to know why you did this to me." She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Instead, she took a shaky breath, her eyes darting to Mark as if seeking help. But this was between us. There was no one else to shield her from the consequences of her actions. "James, it was a mistake," she finally said, her voice trembling. "I never wanted to hurt you." "A mistake?" I echoed, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. You think a mistake involves sneaking around behind my back? You think lying to me for months is a mistake?" "I didn't mean for it to happen," she pleaded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. It was a moment of weakness. I was confused. I thought I could handle it. "Handle it?" I laughed, a hollow sound that echoed in the silence of the room. "You can't handle a lie like this, Caitlyn. You can't just handle the fact that you betrayed me." "I know I messed up," she said, her voice breaking. "But I love you, James. I never stopped loving you." "Love?" I shook my head, anger and heartbreak warring within me. "Love doesn't look like this. Love doesn't involve betrayal and deceit. You think saying you love me makes this all better? You've shattered everything we built together." Tears streamed down her cheeks now, and I could see the desperation in her eyes. "I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. I thought I could end it, but then it spiraled out of control." "Spiraled out of control?" I spat, my voice rising. "You think an affair just happens? You made choices, Caitlyn. You chose to be with him." I know. She was crying now, her hands trembling. "But I didn't mean to hurt you. I thought I could fix it. I thought I could make it right." "Fix it?" I said incredulously. "How can you fix something that's already broken? You've destroyed my trust, my belief in you. I can't just pretend this didn't happen." "Please, James," she begged, stepping closer, her hands reaching out as if to touch me. I recoiled instinctively, the sheer thought of her hands on me now feeling tainted. "Don't," I warned, my voice low and firm. "You've lost that right." She took a step back, the realization of what she had lost washing over her. "What are you saying?" I took a deep breath, the weight of my decision pressing down on me. I can't do this anymore. I can't stay in a marriage built on lies. But now, as I read through the papers, the atmosphere of betrayal hung over me like a dark cloud. That's when I noticed an envelope peeking out from beneath a stack of files. It was unmarked, but the familiar handwriting sent a shiver down my spine. I opened it slowly, my heart racing. Inside was a letter detailing Caitlyn's past relationships, affairs that predated our marriage. Each word felt like a dagger, piercing through the remnants of my heart. "James," it began, "you deserve to know the truth about Caitlyn. She has a history of deceit." My hands trembled as I read on, the words blurring together. The letter recounted her relationships, each one revealing a pattern of manipulation and betrayal. I felt rage bubbling within me, but mixed with it was an overwhelming sense of betrayal. Not just from Caitlyn, but from everyone who had allowed me to believe in her innocence. I tossed the letter aside, my breath coming in harsh gasps. How could she do this? I whispered to myself, staring blankly at the wall. Just then, my phone buzzed, jolting me from my thoughts. I glanced at the screen and my heart sank. It was a text from Caitlyn. "James, can we talk? I have something important to tell you. Something that could change everything." A wave of conflicting emotions surged through me. Anger, curiosity, and a flicker of hope. What could she possibly say that would change anything? I wanted to ignore her, to delete the message and move on with my life, but a part of me was intrigued. I found myself typing a reply. What could you possibly have to say that would change anything? I hesitated before hitting send, my mind racing. I waited, pacing the floor, imagining the confrontation that might follow. I envisioned her pleading, her eyes filled with tears, trying to explain away her betrayal. But what could she say? How could she justify the pain she had caused? My phone buzzed again. "Please, just meet me. I promise it's important." I clenched my jaw, my heart pounding. I glanced at the clock. The day was slipping away, and a part of me wanted to confront her, to demand answers. But what if this was a trap? What if she was simply trying to manipulate me one last time? I had to be cautious. I finally replied, "Fine, where?" "Let's meet at the cafe on 5th, tomorrow at 3 p.m. I let out a slow breath, feeling the tension in my shoulders. I didn't want to go. I wanted to move on, to forget her and the pain she had caused. But I also knew that I needed closure. I needed to hear her side of the story, if only to lay this chapter of my life to rest. The next day, I arrived at the cafe early, my heart racing as I took a seat at a corner table. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air, but I couldn't enjoy it. My mind was a whirlpool of thoughts. Would she show up? What would she say? When the clock struck 3, I spotted her walking through the door. There she was, Caitlyn, looking as beautiful as ever. But the glow I once adored seemed dulled by guilt. Her eyes darted around the room until they landed on me. I could see the hesitation in her step as she approached. "James," she said softly, taking a seat across from me. Her voice was laced with uncertainty. "Thank you for meeting me. Let's get to the point, Caitlyn. You said you had something important to tell me." I replied, my tone more biting than I intended. She hesitated, her gaze dropping to the table. I know I've hurt you, more than I can ever express, but there's something you need to understand. Before we got married, I made some choices that I deeply regret. Choices that could ruin everything for me if they were to come to light. David threatened to expose them if I ever left him. I was stunned into silence. So you stayed with him out of fear? You put our whole marriage at risk? I thought I could handle it. I thought I could keep him at bay, but I was wrong. I was so wrong. The betrayal cut deeper with each word she spoke. So all of this was a game to you? You were playing with my heart? No, I loved you, James. I still do. But I was trapped in my own lies, and I didn't know how to escape. I thought I could keep you safe from my past. Safe? By cheating on me? My voice dripped with incredulity. You think that was the way to protect me? I know it's hard to understand, but I'm begging you to listen. David could hurt you too. He could make your life miserable if he wanted to. I thought I could end things quietly, but he won't let me go. I leaned forward, my heart pounding in my chest. Are you saying that you're still in danger? I don't know what he's capable of, but I do know that he has connections, people who can ruin lives. I never thought it would come to this, but I'm terrified, James. For a moment I saw the fear in her eyes, and it softened the edges of my anger. So you're saying that you want to protect me? After everything? I want to protect us. I want to be free of him, but I need your help. I shook my head, trying to process her words. Why would I help you after everything you've done? Because you still care. I can see it in your eyes. Please, just listen. I can explain everything, and I promise I'll make things right. But I need you to trust me one last time. The weight of her words hung heavily in the air. I felt torn between the anger that had fueled my decision to divorce her and the remnants of love that still flickered within me. And if I say no, then I fear for both of us. David is not someone to take lightly. He will come after you if I don't resolve this. I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that washed over me as I considered her words. You expect me to believe that you're asking for help after everything? That you're not just trying to manipulate me one last time? Caitlyn looked at me, her eyes pleading. I would never do that again, I swear. Just give me a chance to explain. Meet me tomorrow and I'll tell you everything. I'll show you that I'm serious. I hesitated, my heart racing. A part of me wanted to walk away, to leave her behind for good, but another part of me couldn't shake the unease that simmered in the back of my mind. She was right. David was a threat. And if what Caitlyn said was true, I needed to know more.